I have embarked on a playfulness challenge to live playfully, put that into my calendar and not feel guilty about it. Having time to play gives my brain time to rest from the to-do list. Playfulness is so embedded into our DNA as kids. That is how we learned to walk and talk and do all the things, all the skills.
Okay, welcome Yvonne Marchese. I'm so happy to have you here with me. You're the first guest on Uplifting Lifestyle Vision with Yael, and I'm really excited. We've known each other for 3 years now, I think. We met on Clubhouse. And Yvonne Marchese is an artist. I think I define you as an artist first and foremost. She's an actress and a photographer and a podcaster and maybe some other things that you'll tell us about. And I'm really happy to have you with me.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me to be on your show.
So, Yvonne calls herself, her podcast is called Late Bloomer Living, and she calls herself an age agitator. So maybe, I don't know if I wanted to start with this, but maybe we will, and you'll define for us, what does it mean to be an age agitator?
It means that I'm trying to agitate people's awareness about their attitude towards aging because I have always been afraid of aging. I knew that about myself. I was more afraid of aging than dying. Probably still am. But what I didn't realize that was doing to me was once I did actually start to get older, that attitude towards aging started to be something that was holding me back from living my best life. I was having limiting thoughts about what was possible for myself as a person who was getting older. I was feeling like everything was all downhill. And when I realized that thought process was hamstringing me from taking new chances, pursuing new interests, that's when I was like, oh my gosh, wait a minute. Am I the only one who feels this way? Am I the only one who has been having thought loops about myself that it's all over? And that's when I decided to start the podcast because I wanted to tell the stories of other people who had come up against problems in their lives in midlife and it busted something open for them and they managed to get through it on the other side. And so that's how the podcast started.
So I think this is something which is true for all of us, or most of us, that we kind of come against a brick wall when we reach midlife, and things have to shift for us because otherwise we bang our heads against it. Because I think if you live your life and it's an upward climb to midlife. When you get there and you say, okay, what's next? And what is it, downhill from here? And we say, no, I think that's what you mean, is there is another peak that we can actually climb, and maybe it's not as steep and not as difficult, but maybe this time it's better to enjoy it, enjoy the way. And I think that's what you're doing now, right? So you embarked on something lately. What is it?
I have embarked on a playfulness challenge, a challenge for myself to live playfully. And that involves a couple of different things, Yael, as I've looked at it. It involves making more time in my life for play, for the traditional idea of what we think of as play, blocking off little bits on my calendar where I can go for a walk on the beach, where I get to do something that I know makes me feel good and gives me energy, roller skating or paddleboarding in the summertime. It's about letting myself put that into my calendar and not feel guilty about it and consider it wasted time or frivolous time or selfish time. Because what I'm coming to realize is that playfulness is so embedded into our DNA as kids. That is how we learned to walk and talk and do all the things, all the skills. We
Mhm.
approached it from an exploratory, experimental, ooh, what if I do this? What if I do that? And that's kind of what I'm looking to incorporate in my life. So having time to play gives my brain time to rest from the to-do list, from the work. But the other aspect of the challenge is to have a more playful attitude going into that work because I'm fortunate and I have the privilege of hosting this podcast and being a photographer and doing work I love. But there's a lot of little things that go into doing that that are tedious, mundane, businessy kind of things. And um, I have to remind myself that I get to do this. It's not
Mm.
that I have to. Nobody told me to start a podcast. Nobody said, Yvonne, you need to be a photographer. So I have to remember that this is something that I love doing. And so I'm trying to tap into that as often as I can.
So I think maybe you have here a startup, and not for older people, but for younger people, because I think that maybe one of the problems of society is that we stop playing as we get into our 20s, where when responsibility starts sitting on our shoulders and we see playfulness as something to be guilty about. And
Yeah.
then we kind of escape into other things like booze, like smoking, whatever, weed. Some people have affairs. Just to let that energy, the danger, the feeling of playfulness, we need it, and it's not accepted. And what
Yeah.
you're trying to do is make it acceptable for life, for your life.
Yes.
And I love the notion. I love the idea is living playfully. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm a bit older than you. I think about 10 years or maybe more. I'm 65 next week.
Well, we are
So
10 years. We're
10
maybe a
years.
little bit less actually because I turned 56 in July. So
Okay. So, and I know that what I did, yeah, in recent years, that's what I've been doing. I'm trying to live life more playfully, like to infuse joy into my life. And that's my mission to infuse joy into other people's life. I want them to be able to feel joy, to search for what is giving them joy. And you're just doing the same thing and just in a different manner. And I
we're
really
so
love it.
aligned. We're
Yeah.
so aligned in that, Yael. And I get so excited about the idea because I think, imagine what the world could be like if people let themselves pursue the things they want, that fill them with joy. I mean, who would have time for, being like I think it takes away a sense of scarcity, worry, stress. And if we're less stressed, then maybe the world would be a better place to live in because we'd all
Absolutely.
have this sense of self fulfilled satisfaction that's like bubbling up in us. And who would
Mhm.
have time to fight with each other if that's where we're all coming from?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I really agree. So I want to ask you, you made a transition. You were an actress, right? What made you make that transition from being an actress to being a photographer? Was it only family, or was there something inside that said, maybe I'm not built for this anymore?
It was both. I I started I moved to New York when I was 25 to pursue the acting career.
Mhm.
Prior to that, I had done a lot of theater in Denver, Colorado, and but my life dream was to be a New York theater actress. That's what I
Like
wanted.
many others, yeah.
I mean, from the time I was 7 years old, there was never any possibility that I was going to Los Angeles to pursue a career there. I wanted to go to New York City. I wanted to live there. I wanted that energy. And it was everything I ever wanted. And it was how I identified myself. And as I got into my 30s, I started to see how the life of an actor I started to realize that I was less than satisfied with continually going on auditions. I was afraid to go on vacations because an opportunity might come right when I'd go on vacation. I
Mhm.
didn't want to change my hairstyle because I invested a ton of money into getting photos done for headshots. So there were all these limitations, and I didn't want to do a lot of commercial work. I didn't want to sell products as an actor that I didn't believe in, and that was a viable way to make money. Theater actors don't make a lot of money. And so I just started my values. I started really looking at my values and did this fit with my values? And then I became a mom, and I thought after the first couple of years, I thought I'd go back to acting and auditioning, and I did. And when I started doing that, I realized in very short order, I would audition and I'd get a call back. And my husband is also an actor. So he would be auditioning and getting callbacks. And I realized that I just didn't have the energy to put into the whole process anymore. And I wanted to be a mom, I wanted to be with my child. Um, but then that led to a 5-year trip through the desert, I'll say,
Yeah.
of who am I? What do I want to be when I grow up? Because that had never been a question in my mind. What do I
That
want
was
to
your
be?
early 40s, late 30s? When was
That
that?
was late 30s. Yeah. So
Yeah.
from about the time I had my child until I turned 40, I really didn't know what I was going to do next. And it was a major identity crisis, I would say.
Mm.
Um, but then I fortunately got laid off from a job in the 2008 recession. And I came home from that. I was devastated. And I came home and I said to my husband, "What am I going to be when I grow up?" And he said, "You're going to be fine. You're going to figure it out. Sleep on it. Don't worry." And I went to bed that night and I got up in the morning and I looked at my husband first thing in the morning and I said, "I want to be a photographer."
Yeah.
And it came out of nowhere, Yael. It came out I had been trying to take good pictures of my kids and flowers and things that I love, and I had a little point and shoot camera. This was pre-cell phone
Yeah.
camera, and I never could get the kinds of photos that I knew I wanted. So I bought my first real camera. We had a little bit of space left on our credit card, and he let me use that to buy a fancy camera. I enrolled in a photography program
Mm.
and I studied from home and I started doing I carried that camera everywhere with me in a big purse. And I started learning and I started doing side gigs while I was working another job and slowly built up a business and it saved me.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can relate because I went to film school in my mid 30s. And but that's for another story. Actually, it's on your podcast, and whoever wants to listen to it can go there. And I put in the show notes. I put a link to the podcast so you can listen to it. And yeah,
You have
you
a
have it on
great
your
story.
website,
I
don't
love your
you?
story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the story is there. What I did and how I transitioned from one job to another, which is really a story. So then, okay, so you reach midlife, and why did you start that podcast? And it's called Late Bloomer Living. Now, why did you choose the name, and what made you start it?
I started the podcast as okay, let me back up. By the time I got to be about 48 years old, I had finally managed to go full time with my photography business. And you would think at that point, yay, victory, woohoo, we're done. No, I was having trouble getting up in the mornings. I was having trouble focusing. I was angry a lot of the time. I did not want to get up, and I cannot explain to you how much I didn't want to get up in the mornings. I would hit the snooze
Yeah, you
button.
don't need to explain it to me. I've been through menopause as well.
Yes, and I didn't realize at the time that
Mm,
these were perimenopausal things that were happening.
yeah.
I've only realized that in the past couple of years. But um I there was a morning where it came to it, and I had gotten up late as usual and was in the usual rush and craziness of trying to get the kids out the door on time. And of course they're kids. They're not organized and they move slowly, and I'm getting angry at them. I'm like, "Where's your lunchbox? Get your
Yeah.
stuff. Let's go. We're late." And by the time we get down to the car, I looked in the rearview mirror and I saw these big fat crocodile tears coming down my kid's face. And I was so disgusted with myself, and I thought, "I am almost 50 years old, and I was literally having an adult tantrum, wasn't
Yeah.
I?" And I thought, why can't I get my shizzle together? Why does everybody else in the world seem to have it figured out, this whole adulting thing that I can't seem to manage?
Which is not true, but you didn't know that.
Right. And so I started down the path in real earnestness of trying to figure some stuff out for myself. And I found Mel Robbins' book, The five
Mm.
Second Rule,
Mm.
which blew things wide open for me because she had some similar things with the snooze button that were really affecting her. And I thought, okay, I am divorcing my snooze button. I am breaking up with the snooze button. And so I took her advice and I put my alarm across the room, my phone, put it across the room so it would go off in the morning. I'd have to get my feet on the floor and walk across the whole room to turn it off. And once I did that, it made it a little bit easier to keep going. And I decided on top of that that I was going to do a 30-day experiment
Mm.
to get up before the family, before I had to put out fires and do all the things, and take time for myself to meditate and move my body and exercise. And that was a complete game changer. I'd say about a month later, I went in to wake up my older kiddo and kissed him on the head. And he had no idea what I was doing, but he just looked at me and he said, "You seem happier, Mom."
Mm.
And I couldn't believe it, and I realized that I was on the right track finally. And I felt so much more energy than I had for the past decade, and I was like, "Wow, I feel better than I felt all through my 40s." Like, I feel so much better. And I started to feel hopeful about my future, and I started to think about, well, if I'm gonna be 50 soon, I'm very likely to live into my 80s, with pretty good health. It's possible. That's 30 years. What am I going to do with that time? And I started to get excited about it instead of dreading it. And when I realized the difference that that made in how I was looking at what was possible for me, I started to get even more excited.
Mm.
And I started to think, I bet I am not the only one who feels this way. And that's what inspired the podcast.
Mm.
But that took me 2 years to actually start the podcast because I didn't think I was qualified.
Took me 2 years, I think 3. Took me
Right?
3 years. And yeah, so
Yeah.
I see. Wow. Yeah, so the podcast is 4 years old. You have
Yeah, in
over
June.
100 episodes, and we'll link for it. We'll link to it, of course, in the show notes on Amazon. I'm very curious. And can you show it to us? Can you tell us about it? What is it about?
Oh my goodness. I love this little book. Can I just tell you? I call it the little book that could. I never intended to become an author. Can I just say that? But this little book is a combination of my photography, of my flower photography, and quotes, not quotes, but definitions on of the word bloom. So it's called In Full Bloom, A Guide to Aging Playfully. And by the way, I wish I had done the subtitle to be A Guide to Living Playfully at Any Age.
Hmm.
Just want to say that. Now I know. But
Second edition.
it's filled with flower photography from, some of them are from my big fancy camera and some of them were my iPhone. And there are definitions of the word bloom, like to thrive. I looked up the definition of the word bloom one day and I realized how tied the word bloom is to the idea of youth.
Mm.
And I thought, what if I were to rewrite these and leave out anything that has anything to do with being youthful and just talk about the possibility of blossoming and blooming? And so it's a little pick your own adventure book that you can open up on any given day and have like a little daily boost or something to think about for your day, and you can keep it on your nightstand or your desk
This is
and
the
look at it.
perfect Mother's Day, right? The perfect Mother's Day present,
Yeah. Yeah.
or for anyone, birthday
Can I just
present.
tell you? Ooh, can I just tell you, my aunt, who is in her 80s, one of her favorite things, oh, I don't know if I can find it right away, but one of her favorite parts of the book, she told me, was at some point I said something. There's a part of the definition of the word bloom that's like to suddenly appear, and I
Mm.
took that idea and thought, oh, okay. So I asked the question in the book, have you surprised yourself recently? And she told me that that was her favorite part of the book. At 80 something years old, she was like, I love that idea of surprising myself. So,
Great.
anyway.
Yeah. I love that too. And for any age. Okay, my dear, thank you so much. Uh, I want to ask you a few questions. You know the Bernard Pivot questionnaire, Actor Studio.
Oh, yes.
Okay,
Okay.
I took a takeoff. It's not. It's not what's your favorite word, etc. It's something
Okay.
completely different. But I'm going to ask you a question, and what I would like you to do is to repeat the question, so we can afterwards we can cut it into shorts for you, for me, etc. But before that, before I ask you that, no, I want to relate to one of I was looking through your. I think it's funny because I wanted the things that I wanted to ask you, and I almost forgot. So let's just go back. I remember when you started with the rollerblades. Now, rollerblades, you did it as a kid, so it's not something new to you. But in our age, we start thinking about the danger because a fall can be bad. It's not very easy to heal from a fall. And it took a lot of courage to just go there and into the skating rink and start skating. And I remember your first video. You made a video of you trying to do that. And so I want to ask you, what made you go skating again, and what does it make you feel when you do that? I'm not asking about the paddle boarding. I think I feel the same thing about paddle boarding as you do, because there is but the skating is it's skirting with danger. It's you're, and I want to know why and how does it make you feel?
So the reason I started again is because I didn't feel the danger when I was a kid. All I felt was freedom.
Hmm.
There's something about, especially when I was a kid, skating fast. Oh man, just it's like the wind in your hair and just this excitement that came with it, Never I
My
fell.
envy. I'm
What's that?
envious. I never did. I never did.
Oh, oh my gosh. I spent a good 2 to 3 years on skates almost every day. As long as I could get out on my skates, I was out on my skates. I skated outside, I skated in my friend's garage, I skated at the skating rink when I could. Um, and I wanted that experience again. And I thought, well, okay, if I put on a bunch of pads and a helmet, I've got some protection, but I have to say, Yael, I was not prepared for how scared I was
Mm,
when I put those skates on the first time and realized how wobbly I was. My balance was not what it was when I was a kid. And it was very nerve-wracking. But I was determined because I had been dreaming about it for probably a couple of years. I've been wanting to get back on my skates.
mm,
And so I thought, well, I've got all the padding. I'm just gonna go slow and see how this works. And so I literally would go out for 10 or 15 minutes at a time. I
mm,
didn't push the boundaries too much. It was just to get used to being on the skates again. And after a couple of months, I felt much less wobbly. There's still some, and now I purposefully, when I go skating now, I will try to do things that make me uncomfortable on my skates because I know that if I turn, let's say clockwise to go backwards or to stop, I'm very comfortable going in that direction. My body remembers that from when I was a kid. Old habits, they came back. But going in the other direction to stop is completely uncomfortable and dangerous, frankly. Like I can really wipe out going in the other direction. So I've started slowing myself down and practicing going into that direction over and over and over again. And the same thing when I'm going backwards on my skates and I want to turn and go forwards. I am teaching myself to go in the other direction. And it's really so that I can stay safe on my skates in the long run. So that if I have to avoid something, step over something, do anything.
I envy you. I envy you. I never, and I probably uh, won't go on skates. It's too dangerous. I had a hip bone operation. I had an operation on my hip joint, and it is very rickety. I'm doing a lot of sports and I'm doing a lot of stuff to strengthen myself, but I'm not going to endanger it. So there are some things that I'm not doing. I'm not running, quite a few things, regretfully. But yeah,
Yeah.
I accept that and I do other things, whatever I
And
can.
that's the thing. I don't think roller skating is the answer for everybody.
No, no.
It's the answer for me because I enjoy it so much.
Mm.
So for anybody else who's looking for something to bring some feeling of playfulness into your life, really go back and look at what you enjoyed as a kid. And if it's not something you can do anymore, think about are there parts of it that you could enjoy in a different way doing something else that captures that essence of what you enjoy.
I think when if as kids we used to climb trees, maybe now we can go on those climbing walls, because you have a harness, and
Yeah,
you could. And I'm still planning to do that. And
I'll go with you.
yeah, yeah. So it's a challenge, and I'm going to do it. Okay, I
Someday we're
challenge.
going to go paddleboarding together and we will go learn how
I'm
to
just
rock climb
coming to the
together.
States. I've just come.
I love it. I love it.
Okay, so that was a question that I had. So now, as we went through this, I'm going to ask you those questions. I want you to answer with the question itself so we can actually cut it into shorts, okay? And
Okay.
I have complicated questions now, not so. No, no, no. Okay. If I could go back in time, to what age would you, if you could go back in time, to what age would you go back and what would you tell her whatever, if she was a girl, a teenager, or a young woman, maybe an older woman, young mom. So here is yours.
So if I were to go back to an earlier age to give myself advice, I would probably go back to my early 20s and tell her that she doesn't need to be a people pleaser. She doesn't need to be perfect, and that she should go take the chance right away on everything she wants to do. And don't worry about needing experience in order to go do something, because you will get the experience when you do the thing.
Great. Ah, that's a great answer. What do you wish you had known when you started your podcast?
What do I wish I had known when I started my podcast? I wish I had known. I don't know what I wish I had known when I started my podcast. It was a pure delight to start my podcast. I got up every morning in the beginning excited to figure things out and to do things. I guess maybe the one thing I would have wished I knew was that it would be as easy as it is to find guests. Because I that was the main thing that I was nervous about, was why would anybody come be a guest on this podcast that's, from somebody they've never heard of.
Okay. Um, how how do you see yourself in 10 years' time?
How do I see myself in 10 years' time? I see myself feeling really good, having a lot of energy, doing work I love that brings in money and helps to support my family, and spending time with my husband and my kids and my friends.
Maybe grandchildren.
Maybe. I love
Maybe.
those paintings behind you, by the way. They're
Okay,
beautiful.
this is me, both of them, both paintings, and they were painted by a very good friend of mine. She's my painting teacher. And the paintings that I painted are under her instructions, and that was me about 15 years ago. She took some pictures, and on she never took pictures. She took her dad's camera, and she said, I want to paint figures, and she just took some pictures of me dancing on the beach, and then she chose two and she painted them. So I have
So
them here.
cool.
Yeah,
How awesome is that? That's
it
awesome.
is. It is. I love it.
Wow.
This is if you could live your life all over again, what would be your first career choice?
If I could live my whole life over again, what would be my first career choice? I think it would still be acting. I'm very happy with myself for taking the chance to do what I did. And because acting is as a career, it's kind of a calling. I mean, that sounds a little, I don't know, grandiose, but um what I now realize is that the common thread with everything I've ever done is storytelling. So I started off as an actor, as a piece of a puzzle in a production that somebody else wrote, directed, and I did my part to tell the story. And then as a photographer, I'm behind the camera capturing somebody's story. And then on the podcast, I am quite literally helping people to tell their story. And I think that story is so essential to who we are as humans, and that's why the stories we tell ourselves are so important. So if we are telling ourselves a story about aging that's disempowering, we're going to make that true. And if we're telling ourselves a different story that has possibility and excitement and curiosity, then that can be true as well. So I would still I first career, I'd still go with the acting.
So that leads me to the last question, and I think you answered it, but maybe you better elaborate. What advice do you have to a woman in midlife crisis when she hits the
I
brick wall?
Yes. The advice that I have for any woman in midlife who feels like she's having a midlife crisis is to consider the possibility that it's not a crisis. Consider the possibility that this is a moment of awakening for you, that that midlife is an amazing opportunity for you to accept yourself for who you truly are and let her come out and blossom.
Wow. Thank you so much, Yvonne. That was a pleasure. Is there anything else you want to add, or have we covered everything? I want
Oh
first,
my
let's
goodness.
ask, can you tell people how they can reach you?
Absolutely. So you can always find me at latebloomerliving.com, and all the things are there. You can find the book there. I have a community for women called the Age Agitators Club. It's not as scary as it sounds. It's actually very fun. We meet once a month on Zoom and keep thinking about this idea about how to surprise ourselves as we get older. And I've started doing what I call play shops to help people tap into how to be more playful and experimental with their
Mm,
lives. So that's something that I've started doing recently as well. And all the information is there. I'm on all the places as latebloomerliving.com. I'm on Instagram a lot as Late Bloomer Living.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I like to invite the viewers to our Clubhouse room. We met on Clubhouse 3 years ago during COVID, during the pandemic. And we hold her. Yvonne is the one who is really hosting it. I'm helping to moderate, but it's in the Second Act Sisters Club, right?
Hmm.
And you can always look it up, because I think you on Instagram you usually put the invite in your stories or something, that people
Yes, I
can follow
do.
us there. It's every Wednesday at 10 a.m. EST, I think,
Eastern
right?
time, yep. And if anybody wants to join my email list, I always put a link to join the Clubhouse room with an announcement about what we're going to be talking about. It's every
Great.
Wednesday. So, and we have a great group, don't we,
We
Yael, of
do, we
these
do.
ladies who meet in Clubhouse, and we have conversations that are just, I think, mind-blowing.
Right, absolutely. And you can always listen to our backlog, because we
True.
actually record them, and we put them there so people can join us. So I want to thank you so much. It was really a great honor for me that you came to be a guest, the first guest. And I'll see you on our next Clubhouse room. And thank you all for listening, and goodbye.
Thank you, Yael.
Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, please, and like it. Like Yvonne. Right.
Where's the button? Go to the button.
It's here.
Subscribe.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, Mendelssohn, please. Mendelssohn. Mendelssohn, בבקשה. אל תתפוס לי פה. He would put his paw inside me. and taste it.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
So I saved my glass of water.
Oh my goodness.
Okay.